multiply and divide numbers between 0 and 1. You will be used to multiplying numbers which are whole numbers, but obviously numbers in between 0 and 1 are decimal numbers. So let's have a look at how to multiply and divide with numbers that are in between 0 and 1. So just let's have a look at some examples. So the first example we are going to do is, let's say we do 5 times 0.4. Okay, so 0.4 is between 0 and 1, isn't it? Well, there are two different methods you can use. You can either say, well, I'm going to do 5 times 4, which is 20. And then obviously, because you had times the 0.4 by 10, you've now got to divide by 10 to get 2 as your answer. Simple and straightforward way. However, you could probably also use the Chinese method in this situation. So 0.4 goes at the top, 5 down the side, draw yourself a box, split down between the 0 and the 4, diagonal and a diagonal there, and all you do is you multiply. So 4 times 5 is 20, and then 0 times 5 is 0. Add the diagonals up, so that diagonal there is 0, that diagonal there is 2, that diagonal there is 0. You just drop the decimal point down, so it's 0, 2.0. Now, that's a bit of a strange number, isn't it? When do we ever see 0, 2.0? It's either 2.0 or just 2 on its own. Okay, you can do that with a 2-digit number by a number that's between 0 and 1. So let's have a look how we do that. So for example, now let's say we do 12 times 0.6. Again, two different ways. You could do 12 times 6 first, which is 72. And because you times the 0.6 by 10, you've now got to divide by 10. Or you could think of it as, well, you've taken a decimal point out, so you've got to put the decimal point back in, so it becomes 7.2. Or if you choose to do the Chinese method, which is a lattice multiplication, it would look like this. So 0.6, always the decimal at the top first, if you have just one of them as a decimal. 12 down the side, draw my box, split down, split between the 1 and the 2 as well. And then obviously draw your diagonals. There we are. Now just times the numbers across. So 6 times 1, 0, 6, because 0 10s and 6 1s. 6 times 2 is 12, 1 10 and 2 1s. 0 times 1 is 0, and 0 times 2 is 0, so 0, 0. You just add the diagonals now. So this diagonal here is just 2. This diagonal here is 7. This is 0, this is 0. Just drop the decimal point down, okay, like that there, and the answer is 7.2. Now, you might be thinking, well, actually, what's going to happen now if I have two numbers which are between 0 and 1, so two decimals that are between 0 and 1, and you have to times them together? So you may also have a situation like this. I'm just going to say 0.3 times by 0.8. And you can see that both of these numbers are between 0 and 1. I will suggest to do the Chinese method because it's easier and quite simple and straightforward. So 0.3 at the top and 0.8 down the side. It doesn't matter which one goes at the top and which one goes down the side because both of them are decimals, so it doesn't really matter. It's just when you have one of them that's a decimal, then it has to go to the top. Draw your box, split between the 0 and the 3, and split between the 0 and the 8. Draw your diagonals. Okay, 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 8 is 24. 0 times 0 is 0, and 0 times 8 is 0. You just add the diagonals now. So this diagonal is 4, and that's 2, that's 0, and that's 0. Now, we don't just drop the decimal point down in this situation because we have two decimals. So, I mean, how would it work that we drop the decimal point down if we were to do so? Because it wouldn't work because we have two decimals. So what you have to do is you have to find where the decimals meet and then drop down the diagonal. So the decimals meet, if I get a different color pen and I show you, so that and that, if you get your finger, find the meet there, then you drop it down the diagonal, which is here. Okay, so it is 0.24. So 0.24 is your answer. You could have just done 8 times 3 to get 24, but because you've times this one by 10 and this one by 10, because the 0.3 times 10 is 3, and 0.8 times 10 is 8, you've got to divide it by 100, put 2 decimal points back in, which is 0.24. Similar, let's have a look at one more with multiplying. You might have something like this. 0.52 times 0.71. Again, it's entirely up to you. I will suggest the lattice method because again, it's simple and straightforward. So 0.52 at the top, 0.71 down the side. Okay, split between each of your digits. Now we've got more digits here, so we're going to have more boxes. The only issue with the lattice multiplication is actually drawing the box. So you might sometimes get the box wrong, or you might find it difficult to draw the box. But other than that, it's quite simple and straightforward. So diagonals, and obviously it's important that you get the diagonals the right way, which is this way. There is a video on the channel to do with this, or the website, if you want to have a look at in more detail the lattice multiplication. But if your diagonals are not this way, then your answer is incorrect at the end. They have to be this way, the diagonals. So let's just fill out the box. So 2 times 0, 0. 2 times 7, 14. 2 times 1, 2. 5 times 0, 0. 5 times 7, 35. 5 times 1, 5. 0, 5. 0 times 0, 0. 0 times 7, 0. And 0 times 1, 0. So obviously anything times by 0 is just 0, isn't it? Add the diagonals, that's 2. 4, add 0, add 5 is 9. That diagonal is just 6. That's 3, 0, 0. Again, you have got 2 diagonals. Find where they meet. So you need to obviously use both your fingers when doing this. And you find it meets, then you drop it down the diagonal. And my answer is 0.3692. And you can see how simple and straightforward this was. Again, you could just do 52 times 71. Okay. And obviously that depends on how you want to do this. You might use the lattice multiplication for this. You might use long multiplication. You might use the grid method. But if I do 42 times 71, let's have a look. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 5 is 5. 0 there. 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times 5 is 35. Add 1, 36. Add, that's 2, that's 9, that's 6, and that's 3. Again, I times this one by 100. Okay, and I times this one by 100. So I've got to divide by 100, 2 jumps, and divide by 100 again to get 0.3692. And you can see that I've ended up with the exact same answer. Okay, how about you had a division problem then? Okay, 3 divided by 0.2. Okay, so when you are dividing by decimals, I would suggest that you write it down as a fraction. So this is the most easiest way to start off with. 3 divided by 0.2 could be written like this. Yeah, as a fraction. 3 over 0.2 is exactly the same as saying 3 divided by 0.2. Now, to make this easier, we need to get rid of the decimal point in our fraction. So what can I times 0.2 by? So it's not a decimal anymore. The answer to that is 10. Well, whatever I do to the bottom, I've got to do to the top. So 3 times 10 is 30, and 0.2 times 10 is 2. That now becomes 30 divided by 2, and I know that these two are 2 equivalent fractions, okay? So they're exactly the same, and I can do 30 divided by 2 now. It is 15, okay? And that is the most easiest way to divide by decimals. Let's have a look at another example then to do with this. Okay, let's do 15 divided by 0.4. So again, I know that I can write this down as a fraction. Now we have a problem because I do not want the decimal point. Okay, so we need to times 0.4 by something, so it becomes a whole number, and that the answer to that is 10. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 15 times 10 is 150, and 0.4 times 10 is 4. Now, you have two choices here. You could either do 150 divided by 4, which is quite simple and straightforward, or you can simplify the fraction. I'll half. Okay, I know half of 4 is 2, and half of 150 is 75, isn't it? Now, 75 divided by 2, I can do. So you can do the step method, or you might know it in your head. But 75 divided by 2 is 37.5, and that is your answer. That 15 divided by 0.4 is 37.5. What if you had, let's change it, 120 divided by 0.25. Again, write as a fraction. Now, this time I want 0.25 to become so it's not a decimal. So what I have to do is obviously times it by 100, because if I times it by 10, it's just going to be 2.5 and it's still going to be a decimal. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. Okay, that becomes 12,000 and the bottom becomes 25. You could do 12,000 divided by 25 if you want to, but the easiest way here is to keep simplifying your fraction until you can't simplify it anymore, and then you can do the divide because it'll become easier and the numbers will be smaller. I know both of these numbers are in the 5 times table, so I'm going to divide them by 5. 25 divided by 5 is 5, and obviously I'm going to do 12,000 divided by 5. I could do that in the bus stop quickly, and it's nice and simple and straightforward. 5s into 0 are none, so carry the 1 over. 5s into 12 are 2, left over 2. 5 into 20 is 4, and then 0, 0. The answer is 2,400. Now, I can't simplify that any further, but I can do 2,400 divided by 5. Quickly do that in the bus stop method. How many 5s into 2? 0, carry 2 over. 5s into 24 is 4, 4 left over. 5 into 40 is 8, and 0. The answer is 480. Okay, so 120 divided by 0.25 is 180. Similar, if you had something like this, 0.8 divided by 0.2, 2 decimals this time. You might be thinking, well, what do I do? It's exactly the same. You write it as a fraction. Okay, and then obviously you see, well, I want both the numbers to be whole numbers, so they've both only got 1 decimal place in it, so you can times top and bottom by 10. 0.8 times 10 is 8, and 0.2 times 10 is 2. You can simplify this if you want to, but we know I can do 8 divided by 2, can't we? Which is just 4. So 0.8 divided by 0.2 is just 4. Quite simple and straightforward. What if we had something like this now? 0.64 divided by 0.4. Okay, so again, 0.64 divided by 0.4. Now, you need to times both of them by something so that you get rid of the decimal point. Now, 0.64 has got 2 decimal places and 0.4 has only got 1 decimal place. So I've got to times them both by 100, because if I don't times the top one by 100, I'm still going to end up with a decimal. Okay, 0.4 times 100 is 40, and 0.64 divided by 100 is 64. I have to do 64 divided by 40, but what I can do is I can simplify the fraction. I know they're both even numbers, so I can divide them both by 2. Half of 64 is 32, and half of 40 is 20. I'm going to simplify this again because it'll make my life easier. I will half the top, and I will half the bottom. Half of 32 is 16, and half of 20 is 10. I could do 60 divided by 10 straight away, actually. It's just 1.6, and that is your answer. And you can see how easy it really is. Just writing it down as a fraction and then simplifying it. And there's not much else that you have to do after that, really. And it's the most simple and straightforward way of dividing two decimals together, or dividing a whole number by a decimal, is to write it into a fraction and then to simplify it. So let's have a look at one more example then. Let's do 0.85 divided by 0.55. Okay. So again, 0.85 divided by 0.55. They have both got two decimal places. So I'm going to times them by 100 top and bottom. So get rid of the decimal. The top becomes 85, the bottom becomes 55. Now, 85 divided by 55 is a little bit tricky, so I would need to simplify the fraction. I know they're both in the 5 times table, so I'm going to divide them both by 5. I know from the top of my head that 55 divided by 5 is 11. Well, 85 divided by 5, I can also do in my head, is 17. Okay, now I've got to do 17 divided by 11, which is quite tricky, and I actually can't do that with in my head, and is most likely going to be a decimal number, and you can just leave it as that. If you were to work it out on your calculator, it is 1.54 recurring, but as we know in maths, that if you did write your number as 17 or 11, that would count. Okay, it's like saying a half is exactly the same as 0.5, so it doesn't really matter if you do not write it the answer back as a decimal. The fraction answer will count as well, especially when you've got more awkward answers like 17 over 11. The other ones that we've done above have been quite fortunate to end up with really nice answers like 1.6, 4, 180, 37.5. But when you do get difficult recurring answers, it's absolutely fine to write down the answer as a fraction. So this here was how to multiply and divide numbers that are between 0 and 1. And in particular, it means obviously the decimal numbers that are in between 0 and 1. And we looked at a lot of different methods here, the lattice multiplication, and obviously writing a division into a fraction and then simplifying it till the end until you can't do it any further, and then doing the divide. Hope it was useful. Thank you for watching.